Welcome to Sci-Fi Space. Before we starting today's wonderful story, take a second to check if you've subscribed. Because it's completely free and it is a huge motivation for us to create more great stories. Eleanor Petrov stood at the edge of the observation deck aboard the Dawn Whisper, a modest vessel dwarfed by the looming silhouette of the Iron Sovereign, flagship of the Vulcan Empire. She adjusted the collar of her plain gray suit, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. Around her neck hung a simple wooden pendant, its carved surface worn smooth by time. Her deep-set eyes scanned the approaching warship, a fortress of metal and menace that dominated the void at the galaxy's edge. She was here as a diplomat of the Solaris Coalition, a fragile alliance of planets desperate to avoid annihilation by the ruthless Vulcan Empire. Her mission: negotiate peace with King Court, a ruler infamous for crushing dissent and collecting the bones of his enemies. On the bridge of the Iron Sovereign, Admiral Tarvik watched the Dawn Whisper with a sneer. His four throats rasped in unison as he spoke, a guttural sound that filled the command deck. Look at it. A speck of junk from that pathetic coalition. They send one human to grovel before us. His scales glinted under the harsh lights, each one a testament to battles won and worlds conquered. At over 7 feet tall, he towered over his crew, his presence a living symbol of Vulcan dominance. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Selena Vor, who stood rigid in her polished ceremonial armor. What do we know about this diplomat? Selena shifted uncomfortably, her four eyes blinking in sequence, a Vulcan tick that betrayed her unease. Her name's Eleanor Petrov, sir. She's brokered peace in 19 conflicts across the galaxy. Reports say she's never lost a negotiation. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened around the edge of her data tablet. Tarvik barked a laugh, the sound echoing off the steel walls. 19. We've burned 19 systems to ash in half that time. She's a fool if she thinks words will stop us. He waved a clawed hand dismissively. King Court wants her dealt with quickly. No ceremony, no delays. She's here to learn her place. Selena hesitated, then pressed on. Sir, there are rumors about her. Some call her the Void Whisperer. They say those who cross her don't live long enough to regret it. Tarvik's primary eyes narrowed, but his amusement didn't fade. Superstition. You've been reading too many coalition fairy tales, Commander. Prep the docking bay. I want her scanned and stripped of anything remotely useful before she steps foot near the king. The Dawn Whisper slid into the docking bay of the Iron Sovereign, its engines humming faintly as it settled into place. Eleanor stepped onto the platform, greeted by a squad of Vulcan guards armed with energy rifles. Their scales clicked as they moved, a subtle threat in every gesture. She carried no weapons, no visible tech, just her suit, her pendant, and an air of unshakable calm. Admiral Tarvik strode forward, his bulk casting a shadow over her. Eleanor Petrov, I assume. Her voice came low and steady, tinged with an accent the translators couldn't smooth out. Correct, Admiral. I represent the Solaris Coalition. Thank you for receiving me. Tarvik's lip curled, exposing jagged teeth. Don't thank me yet, human. You'll be scanned and searched before you see King Court. Don't expect him to waste time on your little peace talks. Eleanor's lips twitched into a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. I'd expect nothing less. Though I should warn you, some of my belongings are unconventional. Cultural items from my travels. Tarvik snorted. Our security will decide what you keep. Dock your ship and move. The king's patience is thin. As Eleanor followed the guards toward the security chamber, Selena Vor fell into step beside her. The commander's curiosity outweighed her discipline, and she broke the silence. First time on a Vulcan ship. Eleanor nodded. Yes, though I've studied your designs. This is a Titan 9 class, isn't it? Upgraded with tech stolen from the Zoran campaign. Selena's eyes widened briefly, all four blinking in surprise. You're well informed for a human. Most don't bother learning about us until it's too late. Eleanor's smile sharpened. Knowledge is power, Commander. I make it my business to understand who I'm dealing with. Selena stiffened, her tone turning cold. Power here comes from strength, not books. King Korod speaks for all Virkans. His word is law. Eleanor tilted her head, unfazed. Then I look forward to speaking with him. They reached the security chamber, a stark room lined with scanners and guarded by a hulking Virkan named Gorg. His scarred scales gleamed as he barked, "Remove all jewelry. Now." Eleanor touched her pendant, her fingers lingering. "This is a cultural artifact. It's important to me." Gorg snarled, stepping closer. "Take it off, or I'll rip it off." With a sigh, Eleanor unclasped the pendant and placed it in a tray. "Handle it carefully. It's older than you'd believe." Gorg snatched it up, turning it in his claws with obvious disdain. "This? A chunk of wood? You humans cling to garbage." He tossed it roughly into a containment unit, the thud echoing in the room. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something sharp and fleeting, like a blade catching light. "I see," she said softly. "Shall we proceed?" Tarvik watched from the observation deck, arms crossed. "She's too calm," he muttered to Selena, who'd rejoined him. "Most humans tremble when they see us." Selena frowned. Maybe she's just good at hiding it. Or maybe the rumors aren't just rumors. Tarvik scoffed. "Enough. Get her to the throne room. Korod is waiting, and he's not in a mood to play nice." Below, Eleanor moved through the corridors, flanked by guards who glared and muttered insults. She noted every detail, their weapons, their positions, the tension in their movements. This wasn't her first dance with danger, and it wouldn't be her last. King Korod awaited her, a towering figure of muscle and malice, his 6 arms, 2 flesh, 4 mechanical, resting on a throne forged from the spoils of war. His voice boomed as the doors opened. "So, the coalition sends an old woman to beg for mercy? Pathetic." Eleanor stepped forward, stopping at the precise distance protocol demanded. "I'm not here to beg, Your Majesty. I'm here to negotiate terms that benefit us both." Korda's laughter shook the room, joined by the nervous chuckles of his court. "Negotiate? Your worlds are already ours. Your prey, nothing more." Eleanor clasped her hands behind her back, her voice steady. "Then why bother meeting me at all?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, the king's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary diplomat, and he was about to find out why. Eleanor Petrov stood in the sterile confines of the Iron Sovereign's security chamber, her gray suit a stark contrast to the gleaming scales of the Virkan guards surrounding her. Gork, the scarred security chief, loomed over the containment unit where her wooden pendant now sat. He tapped the box with a claw, smirking. "This junk's all you've got? No weapons, no tech, just a stick." His gravelly voice dripped with contempt. Eleanor met his gaze, her tone even. "It's more than it seems. You'd do well to respect it." Gork laughed, a harsh sound that grated on the ears. "Respect? From me? You're lucky I don't crush it right now, human." Before she could respond, the chamber doors hissed open, and Commander Selena Vor stepped in. "Enough, Gork. Get her to the throne room. The king's waiting." Gork snorted but waved his squad into formation. As they marched Eleanor through the ship's corridors, the guards made no effort to hide their disdain. One spat on the floor near her feet, muttering, "Coalition trash." Another shoved her shoulder, testing her reaction. Eleanor didn't flinch, her steps steady, her eyes cataloging every move they made. She'd faced worse than posturing soldiers. Selena fell into step beside her, her 4 eyes flicking between Eleanor and the guards. "They don't like outsiders," she said, her voice low. "Especially ones who think they can talk their way out of a fight." Eleanor's lips curved slightly. "I've noticed. But I'm not here to fight, yet." Selena's scales rippled, a Virkan sign of unease. "You're bold for someone unarmed." What's your plan when Court laughs in your face? Eleanor glanced at her. I adapt, Commander. It's what humans do best. The throne room doors loomed ahead, massive slabs of metal etched with scenes of Verkan conquest, planets burning, fleets shattered, enemies kneeling. The guards halted, and Selena gestured for Eleanor to enter. Don't expect mercy, she warned. Court doesn't negotiate with prey. Eleanor nodded, stepping forward as the doors groaned open. Inside, King Court sat on his throne, a monstrosity of fused bones and steel. At nearly 13 feet tall, his presence dominated the cavernous space. His 6 arms flexed, 2 natural, 4 cybernetic, each one a weapon in its own right. His court flanked him, a mix of advisors and warriors, their eyes glinting with anticipation. So, the Solaris coalition sends a relic to grovel. Corda's voice boomed, the translators barely softening its edge. You're wasting my time. Eleanor stopped at the diplomatic distance, hands clasped behind her back. I'm here to offer terms, Your Majesty, not grovel. Peace could benefit us both. Cord leaned forward, his primary eyes narrowing. Peace? Your outer worlds are already ours. Your ships are toys. We'll take what we want and leave your coalition in ruins. His court chuckled, a low, menacing sound that filled the room. Eleanor didn't blink. If we're so weak, why meet me at all? Why not just attack? Corda's mouth parts clicked in irritation. To see the face of my next trophy before I mount it on my wall. He gestured to a row of skulls lining the throne's base, former enemies, now grim decorations. Eleanor tilted her head. Charming. But I'd like my pendant returned before we continue. It's a requirement for formal talks in my culture. Cord smirked, holding up the wooden trinket, which had somehow reached him from the security chamber. This? A worthless bauble. Your people are sentimental fools. He squeezed, and the pendant cracked in his grip, splinters falling to the floor. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but her voice took on a sharper edge. That was a mistake. Cord laughed, tossing the remains aside. A mistake? No, human, your mistake was coming here. I've already ordered your colonies raised. This meeting's just a formality before your species learns its place. A murmur ran through the court, some nodding in approval, others shifting uneasily. Selena stepped forward, her posture tense. Your Majesty, she's under diplomatic protection. The Galactic Concord. Silence. Court roared, cutting her off. The Concord's for equals, not vermin. We'll strip their worlds bare and broadcast her death as a warning. He raised a cybernetic arm, signaling the guards. Seize her. 4 soldiers advanced, weapons drawn. Eleanor sighed, a sound of quiet disappointment. I warned you to reconsider. The guards lunged, but she sidestepped with unnatural grace, her movements too fast for their bulky frames. One swung a rifle butt at her head, she caught his arm and twisted, sending him crashing into another. The court gasped, and Corda's eyes widened. What's this? He snarled, rising from his throne. Eleanor straightened, brushing her suit as if nothing had happened. A taste of what's coming if you pushed me? Tarvik burst into the room, his face a mask of fury. She took down 2 guards in the docking bay too. She's hiding something. Corda's laughter died, replaced by a growl. Then let's see what she's got. Strip her of everything and lock her in the pit. I'll deal with her myself. Selena hesitated, then spoke up. Sir, if she's this capable, maybe we should. Quiet, Vor. Tarvik snapped. She's one human against an empire. She's nothing. Eleanor smiled faintly, her eyes locking with Corda's. You're wrong about that, Admiral. And you, Your Majesty, should have kept my pendant intact. Cord slammed a fist on his throne, cracking the armrest. Enough games. Take her now. More guards rushed forward, but Eleanor didn't move. Instead, she glanced at the splintered pendant on the floor. The pieces twitched, then began to rise, hovering like tiny, defiant stars. Selena backed away, her voice shaky. What the hell is she? Cord ignored her, his focus on Eleanor. You think tricks will save you? I'll crush you and your coalition with my bare hands. Eleanor's smile widened, cold and unreadable. Try it. The air thickened with tension, the court frozen between fear and loyalty. Cord's rage boiled over, and he pointed at her. Kill her where she stands. The guards charged, and Eleanor's calm facade finally cracked, not with fear, but with something far darker. The real conflict was just beginning. The throne room of the Iron Sovereign erupted into chaos as King Cord's guards charged at Eleanor Petrov. Their energy rifles hummed, claws extended, ready to tear her apart. She stood motionless, her gray suit unrumpled, her hands still clasped behind her back. The first guard reached her, swinging a blade toward her throat. In a blur, Eleanor ducked, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. A sickening crack echoed as his arm bent backward, and he crumpled with a scream. The second guard fired a bolt of plasma, she sidestepped, and the shot scorched the floor where she'd been. Before he could adjust, she drove her palm into his chest, sending him sprawling into a third attacker. The court froze, stunned by her speed. What the hell is she? Admiral Tarvik bellowed, shoving past a trembling courtier to get a better view. Cord rose from his throne, his 6 arms flexing with rage. A trick. She's nothing but a human with fancy moves. His voice shook the room, but a flicker of doubt crept into his eyes. Eleanor straightened, brushing her hands together as if shaking off dust. I warned you, Your Majesty. You should have returned my pendant and listened. The splintered pieces of wood on the floor twitched again, rising higher, spinning in a slow orbit around her. Commander Selena Vor edged forward, her 4 eyes wide. Sir, we need to stop this. She's not normal. Cord ignored her, slamming a cybernetic fist into the air. Enough. Activate my shield. A shimmering barrier flared to life around him, a dome of energy designed to repel anything from bullets to antimatter blasts. He smirked, safe behind his tech. Come on, human. Try me now. Eleanor tilted her head, studying the shield with mild curiosity. Then, without breaking stride, she walked straight through it. The barrier rippled like water, then collapsed with a crackle, leaving Cord exposed. The court gasped, a wave of panic rippling through the ranks. Tarvik drew his sidearm, shouting, Fire! All of you, fire! A dozen guards obeyed, unleashing a barrage of energy bolts. The air lit up with blinding streaks, the noise deafening. Eleanor raised a hand, and the wooden splinters spun faster, forming a swirling shield. The bolts hit it and vanished, absorbed into the vortex. When the smoke cleared, she stood untouched, the floor around her a charred circle. Impossible, Tarvik whispered, his weapon trembling in his grip. Cord's scales darkened with fury and fear. What are you? He demanded, his voice cracking. Eleanor's smile turned cold, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light that cut through the dim room. I told you about Baba Yaga, didn't I? The witch from the old tales. A house on chicken legs, a force neither good nor evil, just unstoppable. Some stories are more than myth, Your Majesty. Her voice shifted, dropping into a raspy, ancient tone that bypassed the translators and burrowed into the Verkan's primal instincts. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything they'd ever heard. Selena stumbled back, her armor clanking against the wall. She's not a diplomat. She's a damn monster. Eleanor glanced at her, almost amused. Monster's a strong word, Commander. I prefer survivor. She flicked her wrist, and the wooden fragments shot forward like bullets. They struck the guards nearest Cord, piercing their armor with pinpoint precision. One clutched his throat as blood sprayed, another dropped, his leg useless. The rest hesitated, their confidence shattered. Cord roared, slamming a button on his throne. Reinforcements. Now. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the ship. Doors slammed open, and dozens more guards poured in, a wall of scales and steel converging on Eleanor. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her suit, empty a moment ago, and pulled out nothing visible. Yet suddenly, 3 guards screamed, collapsing with wounds that appeared from nowhere, as if slashed by an invisible blade. Tarvik fired again, his shots wild. She's using tech we can see. Find it. Eleanor laughed, a low, chilling sound. No tech, Admiral. Something older. Something you forgot existed. The wooden splinters returned to her, orbiting faster, their edges glinting like razors. She stepped toward Court, each move deliberate, predatory. You wanted to send a message to Solaris. Here's mine, harm me, and you'll regret it. Court snarled, backing up until his throne hit the wall. You're one woman. I've got thousands of warriors. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. And I've outlasted empires bigger than yours. Numbers don't scare me. She raised her hand, and the splinters flew again, embedding themselves in the throne's base. Cracks spiderwebbed through the metal, a groan echoing as it began to buckle. Selena grabbed Tarvik's arm. We need to get him out. She'll kill us all. Tarvik shook her off, his pride outweighing his fear. No. She's bluffing. But Court wasn't so sure. His cybernetic arms whirred, reconfiguring into cannons. Die, witch. He fired, twin beams of plasma roaring toward her. Eleanor didn't dodge. The wooden vortex expanded, swallowing the blasts whole. The energy vanished, and the splinters pulsed, glowing faintly. She advanced, the floor trembling beneath her. Last chance, she said, her voice a whisper that somehow drowned out the alarms. Negotiate, or I end this my way. Corda's cannons powered up again, but his hands shook. The court was in disarray, some guards fled, others cowered, and a few still aimed trembling weapons. Tarvik yelled, hold the line, but his voice cracked. Selena stared at Eleanor, realization dawning. She's not human. She never was. Eleanor heard her and smiled, a terrible, knowing grin. Smart girl. Too bad your king's not listening. She stopped a few feet from Court, the splinters hovering like a crown above her head. Your move, she said. The room held its breath, teetering on the edge of annihilation. Whatever she was, she'd just turned the Verkan Empire's power against itself, and she wasn't done yet. The throne room of the Iron Sovereign trembled as Eleanor Petrov faced King Court, the air thick with a stench of scorched metal and Verkan blood. Her wooden splinters spun above her, a deadly halo glinting in the flickering light. Court, his massive frame dwarfing the cracked throne, glared down at her, his 6 arms locked into combat mode. You think you can scare me, witch, he roared, his voice amplified by the cybernetic implants in his throat. I've crushed worlds. You're nothing. But his scales paled, betraying the fear he wouldn't admit. Eleanor didn't respond. She stepped closer, her gray suit pristine despite the chaos. The orbiting splinters pulsed, their edges humming with an eerie energy. Court slammed a fist against his chest, activating his ultimate weapon. The throne split open, mechanical arms whirring as they encased him in a towering exosuite. At 30 feet tall, the armor gleamed with black alloy, its joints hissing steam, its cannons glowing with charged plasma. This is Verkan might, he bellowed through external speakers. Let's see your tricks. Stop this. The court backed away, some fleeing outright as the floor shook under the suit's weight. Admiral Tarvik shouted, blast her to ash, his voice hoarse with desperation. Court obliged, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that lit the room like a dying star. Eleanor raised a hand, and the wooden splinters shot forward, meeting the onslaught midair. Each fragment intercepted a bolt, exploding in bursts of light, the impacts deafening. When the smoke cleared, she stood untouched, the splinters reforming around her. Nice toy, she said, her tone mocking. My turn. With a flick of her wrist, the splinters darted toward the exosuit, targeting its joints. They punched through the armor like needles through cloth, sparks flying as circuits fried. The suit staggered, one arm going limp, then another. Cord snarled, swinging a massive fist. Eleanor sidestepped, the blow cratering the floor where she'd been. She reached out, her fingers brushing the suit's leg. Metal screamed, twisting inward as if crushed by an invisible force. The exosuit toppled, crashing down with a thunderous boom that rattled the walls. Guards scattered, their weapons forgotten. Tarvik aimed his pistol, firing wildly. "Stand and fight, you cowards." But the shots went wide, his hands shaking. Commander Selena Vor grabbed his arm. "Stop. We can't win this." Tarvik shoved her back. "She's one freak against an empire. We don't run." Selena's four eyes narrowed. "Look at him, Tarvik. She's tearing Cord apart." The king, trapped in his ruined armor, pounded the floor, his cannons sputtering as they failed. "Get me out," he screamed, his bravado gone. Eleanor knelt beside the wreckage, tapping the helmet with a finger. The visor shattered, revealing Cord's terrified face. "Had enough?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with menace. He spat, a weak gesture. "You'll die for this, human." She smiled, cold and sharp. "I'm not human. I'm older than your empire, older than your gods. And I don't like bullies." The splinters hovered closer, poised to strike. Cord flinched, his scales clattering. The cord erupted into chaos. A group of advisors near the back drew weapons not on Eleanor, but on Tarvik. "This is your fault," one shouted, a wiry Verkan named Dren. "You pushed Cord into this mess." Tarvik whirled, firing into the group. Dren ducked, returning fire, and a skirmish broke out. Guards hesitated, torn between loyalty to Cord and self-preservation. Selena seized the moment, stepping between the factions. "Stand down. All of you. We need to get the king out of here." Eleanor watched the infighting, unfazed. "Looks like your empire's cracking, your majesty." Cord glared up at her, his breathing ragged. "You've got no army, no fleet. You can't hold us." She leaned closer, her glowing eyes boring into his. "I don't need an army. I'm enough." She stood, the splinters rising with her, and turned to the court. "Anyone else want to test me?" Silence fell, broken only by the groans of wounded guards and the crackle of damaged tech. Tarvik lunged at her, claws outstretched. "I'll rip you apart myself." Eleanor didn't blink. A splinter shot out, piercing his shoulder. He howled, dropping to his knees, blood pooling beneath him. Selena rushed to his side, then looked up at Eleanor. "Please, stop this. We'll listen." Eleanor tilted her head. "Smart move, Commander. Too bad your king didn't agree earlier." She gestured, and the splinters returned, orbiting her like obedient pets. Cord struggled in his wrecked suit, his voice a rasp. "I'll never bow to you." Eleanor crouched again, her tone icy. "You don't have to bow. Just sign the treaty and pull your forces out of Solaris space. Or I finished what I started." She tapped the suit, and another section crumpled, pinning his arm. He gasped, pain overriding his pride. "You're a demon." She shrugged. "Call me what you want. I'm still waiting for your answer." Selena stood, her weapon lowered. "Your Majesty, she's beyond us. We can't fight this." Tarvik, clutching his wound, snarled, "Traitor," but his voice lacked strength. The advisors stopped shooting, their resolve crumbling. Dren stepped forward, hands raised. "I say we hear her out. She's not bluffing." Cord's eyes darted between them, his empire fracturing before him. "Fine," he hissed. "Terms? Now." Eleanor straightened, her smile faint but victorious. "Good choice. Let's talk." The room settled into an uneasy hush, the fight drained from the Virkans. Eleanor had turned their strength against them, and now she held the reins. Corda's defeat wasn't just physical, it was a crack in the Virkan myth of invincibility. But as the dust cleared, Selena whispered to Dren, "She's not done. This isn't over." Eleanor heard and glanced back, her glowing eyes unreadable. The real battle, it seemed, was still ahead. The throne room of the Iron Sovereign lay in ruins, a graveyard of shattered metal and broken pride. King Cord slumped in the wreckage of his exosuite, his scales dull, his 6 arms limp. Smoke curled from the fried circuits around him, and the air buzzed with a faint hum of damaged systems. Eleanor Petrov stood over him, her gray suit untouched, the wooden splinters orbiting her like a silent threat. The Virkan court watched in stunned silence, their weapons lowered, their confidence gone. Blood stained the floor where guards had fallen, and Admiral Tarvik clutched his wounded shoulder, glaring but powerless. Eleanor's voice cut through the stillness, calm and commanding. "Here's the deal, Your Majesty. You withdraw all Virkan forces from Solaris Coalition territory. You sign a non-aggression pact. And you pay reparations for the colonies you've hit. Agree, and I walk away. Refuse, and I finish this." She tapped the crumpled exosuite, and it groaned, metal bending further. Cord winced, his primary eyes darting to his advisors. "You think you can dictate terms to me," he rasped, but the defiance sounded hollow. Commander Selena Vor stepped forward, her 4 eyes steady despite the chaos. "Sir, we've got no choice. She took you down, took us all down. We can't fight her." Tarvik snarled from the floor, his voice weak. "Coward. She's one freak. We've got fleets, armies." Selena ignored him, turning to Eleanor. "If we agree, what's the guarantee you won't come back and finish us off?" Eleanor's smile was thin. "My word. I don't waste time on beaten foes. But test me again, and you'll see what I can really do." Corda's mouthparts clicked, a mix of rage and resignation. "Fine. Draw up your damn treaty." Eleanor nodded, the splinters slowing their orbit. "Smart move. I'll need a comms unit to contact Solaris and quarters to rest in. Nothing fancy, just private." Selena gestured to a guard. "Take her to the VIP wing. Get her what she needs." The guard hesitated, then obeyed, leading Eleanor out. As she passed Tarvik, he spat, "This isn't over, which?" She didn't glance back, but the splinters twitched, and he flinched. Hours later, Eleanor stood in a sleek observation lounge, watching Virkan ships pull back from Solaris space on a hollow screen. The treaty was signed, Corda's signature scrawled under duress after his advisors overruled his protests. Selena entered, a data tablet in hand. "It's done," she said, her tone neutral. "Our forces will be out of your territory in 2 days." The pacts filed with the Galactic Concord. Eleanor turned, one eyebrow raised. "And Cord is okay with his council overriding him?" Selena's scales rippled. "He's not happy, but he's alive. That's more than most expected after today." Before Eleanor could reply, the lounge door slid open, and a new figure stormed in. Ambassador Lorne, a wiry human from Solaris, his face red with fury. Behind him, 2 coalition aides struggled to keep up. "Petrov!" Lorne snapped, jabbing a finger at her. "What the hell did you do? You were supposed to negotiate, not start a damn war." Eleanor's expression didn't shift. "I ended a war, Lorne. Virkans are pulling out." "You're welcome." Lorne's eyes bulged. "By showing off some freak power? You've exposed us. The coalition's calling you a loose cannon, some want you locked up." Selena watched, silent but alert. Eleanor crossed her arms. "I saved your colonies. Cord was set to wipe us out. I gave him a reason to back off." Lorne stepped closer, his voice rising. "You gave him a reason to fear us. That's not diplomacy, that's a threat. The council's freaking out. They think you've got some secret weapon, and they are pissed you didn't tell them. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. I don't answer to the council. I answer to results. Check the hollow, those ships are leaving because of me. Lorne threw his hands up. And what happens when Vulcans regroup? Or when our allies ditch us because they don't trust you? You've put us on a razor's edge. Eleanor's tone turned icy. I've kept us alive. You'd rather be Ash. Lorne glared, then turned to Selena. You saw it. What is she? Some experiment? A mutant. Selena hesitated. She's something else. Not tech, not science, something old. She calls it Baba Yaga. Lorne laughed, a harsh bark. Great. A fairy tale running our foreign policy. The council's gonna love this. Eleanor stepped toward him, her voice low. Tell the council what you want. I've got prisoners to free and a ride to catch. We're done here. Lorne blocked her path. Not so fast. I'm ordering you back to Solaris for debriefing. You don't get to walk away after this stunt. Eleanor's eyes glowed faintly, and Lorne flinched but held his ground. Try it, she said. See how far your orders get you? The aides shifted nervously, hands hovering near their comms. Selena intervened, her tone sharp. Ambassador, she just humiliated my king and saved your people. Maybe cool off before you pick this fight. Lorne shot her a glare. Stay out of this, Vulcan. Your empire's the reason we're in this mess. Selena bristled, but Eleanor raised a hand. Enough. Lorne, I'll deal with the prisoners, then I'm gone. You want to drag me back, bring a fleet. You'll need it. She brushed past him, heading for the detention level. Lorne fumed, turning to his aides. Get the council on the line. She's a liability, we need her contained. Selena watched him go, then muttered, he's underestimating her. Bad move. Outside, Eleanor moved through the corridors, the splinters trailing her like shadows. Court might be beaten, but Lorne's defiance opened a new front one she hadn't planned for. The Vulcans were retreating, but her own side was turning against her. Peace hung by a thread, and she wasn't sure she cared to save it anymore. Eleanor Petrov stood in the shuttle bay of the Iron Sovereign, surrounded by 23 Solaris prisoners she'd freed from the Vulcan cells. Their grateful murmurs filled the air as they boarded the waiting transport. Her gray suit remained spotless, the wooden splinters now reformed into a pendant hanging around her neck. King Kord approached, his massive frame hunched, his pride shattered but his survival instinct intact. Flanked by guards, he kept his distance. Petrov, he growled, his voice tight. The treaty's honored. We're out of your space. But we'll be watching. Eleanor nodded, her expression neutral. Good. Learn from this, Your Majesty. Cooperation beats conquest. Korda's eyes narrowed. A weakling's excuse. She smirked, unclasping her pendant and holding it out. A gift? Something to remember me by. He recoiled, but she set it on a nearby console. Keep it or trash it. Your call. As she turned to leave, Commander Selena Vor stepped close. Those Baba Yaga stories, are they true? Eleanor paused, her smile cryptic. Truth's in the eye of the beholder, Commander. Hope you never find out. The transport lifted off, carrying Eleanor and the prisoners away from the Vulcan flagship. Inside, a young woman leaned forward, her voice shaky. Miss Petrov, did you really face down Kord alone? Eleanor waved a hand dismissively. Diplomacy's messy. We got peace, that's what matters. The woman pressed, but how? They don't negotiate. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. I showed them why humans survive. She gazed out the window, the stars blurring past, her mind elsewhere. Back on the Iron Sovereign, Kord glared at the pendant. Damn witch, he muttered, smashing it with a cybernetic fist. The wood splintered, but instead of falling, the pieces rose, swirling into a tiny figure, a perfect likeness of Eleanor. Her voice echoed from it, low and chilling. "You freed me, Court. I'm not bound to flesh anymore." The figure dissolved into dust, leaving Court and Selena staring in horror. "What the hell does that mean?" Selena whispered. Court had no answer, his scales paling. On the transport, Eleanor's smile widened, her eyes glowing faintly. The prisoners saw a hero, Solaris a rogue, Vulcans a monster, but they were all wrong. She'd played her part, secured peace, and shed her human shell. The pendant wasn't her anchor, it was her cage. Now unbound, she wasn't here to save or destroy, she was here to rule. "They'll see soon enough," she murmured, the glow spreading. The galaxy thought it knew her story. It didn't. Baba Yaga wasn't a diplomat or a savior, she was a conqueror, and her reign was just beginning. And that's the end of this journey, but the story's far from over. Eleanor Petrov, or should I say Baba Yaga, just made the Vulcan Empire and Solaris coalition rethink everything. She's not a hero, not a villain, she's a force beyond comprehension, ready to rewrite the rules of the galaxy. What do you think of this ending? Is she a new threat on the horizon, or just a warning to the arrogant? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read every single one. And if you love sci-fi stories where humans prove we're not to be underestimated, hit that subscribe button for Sci-Fi Space to catch more. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss our next video. We'll be diving into another corner of the HFY universe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you out there in the stars.